All right, now we're going to talk about Associated Press style rules for dates, months, years, decades, days of the week. Those are the stylebook entries that I'll be discussing in this video. And we'll also, some of these things might relate to things that are only contained in the punctuation guide, which is the separate listing only dealing with punctuation. It's actually in the back of the AP stylebook after the main section of A through Z listings. So you should check that out. Okay, what I want to talk about now is let's start with years. Actually, before I even get to that, a key point here to remember in dealing with dates, years, months, and all this kind of stuff. One way to help keep this straight that might help you is to remember that there is a very limited usage of commas in what we're about to talk about. There's only really about 2 instances where you use commas for anything. And there's also a very limited usage of abbreviations. So in this discussion about dates and whatnot, there's really only one very specific instance where you use abbreviations. So try to keep that in mind as a general principle. It might help you remember a little bit what to do. Years alone, those are pretty simple. 2014, just a number, straightforward, use a numeral. This is actually the one exception in the style book where you are permitted to begin a sentence with a number and actually have it still be a numeral. So if you write 2014 will be a good year, you can go ahead and leave that as a numeral at the beginning even though it begins the sentence. In any other instance, you're supposed to change that numeral into words and spell out 2014 or 2014. It doesn't really seem like a good idea. It's a very clunky way to begin a sentence, so I wouldn't recommend doing that. Okay, so years by themselves are pretty easy. Months paired with years are also pretty straightforward. If you want to say March 2012, that's all there is to it. Okay, if you want to say February 1978, that's all there is to that. Notice February is not abbreviated. There's no commas. That's just pairing up with a month with a year. Okay, those are pretty straightforward. Where it does get a little bit more complicated is when we start writing specific dates within a month, a numbered date. So if you say March 8th, for example, that's the correct form. It's March 8th. If you say February 8th, now February gets abbreviated. And here's where it gets just a hair tricky. You have to remember that the short months, the months that only have 5 letters or less in their names, and they conveniently fall right in a row, so March, April, May, June, July, they never get abbreviated for any reason. The other months, the ones that have more than 5 letters, August, September, October, November, December, January, February, they get abbreviated when used with a numbered date like February 8th. So August 12th, September 22nd. Okay, those months do get abbreviated in this form when there is a date, a numbered date in the month with them. Okay, so in any other use, they're spelled out. Now, if we want to pair a numbered date, that's the only use of abbreviations that I was talking about up here. That's the only time abbreviations are going to come into this. Where the commas come in, and in order to really understand this, we need to put it in a sentence to understand how this is going to work. The game was played on March 8th, 2012 in JQH Arena. Okay. Notice what I've done there. We've paired a numbered date with the year, and in that instance, you do have to set the year off with commas. And when I say set it off with commas, what I mean is there's a comma before and a comma after, and they sort of work like parentheses. So you have to have one that opens it and one that closes it. This does not apply if we're only dealing with a year and a month. So if you say the game was played in March 2012 in JQH Arena, now no commas. Okay, no commas in that construction at all. Okay, so like I said, very limited use of commas. This date with a year, that's one example. There is one more. The other example has to do with when you need to pair up a date with a day of the week. So if you were to say the game will be played Tuesday, I should capitalize Tuesday, March 18th in JQH Arena. Notice we've got the same idea here. When we've paired up a day of the week with a date, now the date is set off in commas. And to take that one step further, you don't normally need to do this in news copy, but if you needed to for some reason to add in the year, it would also get a comma as well. So that's a lot of commas, but those are the things that need to be set off with commas in a normal usage in AP. So we're never going to abbreviate days of the week. You may have noticed that I've always been spelling them out. Don't abbreviate Tuesday. They do get written with capital letters, and that's pretty standard across all style guides for days of the week. Just a couple little points of miscellany that I want to go over. If you need to refer to a decade, if you want to say the 1980s, then this is actually the form that AP wants you to use. We make it plural by adding an S, but they don't put an apostrophe in it. AP is very limited on the instances where they would use an apostrophe for anything that's not a contraction being something like it is, or something that's possessive, like Dave's, for example. There are very limited instances where that would be used, and the decades are not one of them. So just make them plural. They don't need an apostrophe. If you think about it, there's really no reason that it needs to be there. That's how you would write decades. Two more pieces of information here. Seasons. If you look up, I didn't include that in my list at the beginning of the video, but check out the entry for seasons. Those are not treated as proper names in AP style, so we don't capitalize fall, summer, spring, winter, autumn, if you prefer autumn to fall. Those are treated as common nouns. They don't derive their names, as far as I know, from proper names. I assume that's the reason they're not capitalized. The one last thing that I should mention in the using of dates, and I should have mentioned this earlier, we don't use the ordinal numbers with dates, so we wouldn't say February 8th, we wouldn't say March 1st, we wouldn't say March 2nd. So these little THs and NDs and RDs at the ends of things, just get rid of those. Now there's places you would use those elsewhere in AP style, but not with dates. Even though we would say March 8th when speaking it out loud, we don't write it that way in AP style. So those are the rules that I want you to know for Associated Press style. And yeah, that's all I've got for now.